All right, CNT140, we're looking at Chapter 10, Fiber Optic Network Install. Here's a bunch of objectives of the chapter. This is another large chapter. Some of this we've covered before, so just a quick reminder here, we're going to stick to the high points in this chapter and refresh ourselves, but also pull out maybe some tidbits we haven't covered before. So preparing for, we got to prepare for, training and safety, and then actually doing the install. That's going to be the focus of our chapter here. So first thing, choose a contractor. The contractor should be, have experience and background in doing this, and the contractor might actually be able to help with the design as well. Instead of just doing the install, maybe help with the design of what's needed for this fiber optic network. The contractor might even be able to help choose the vendors to work with, maybe the brand of manufacturer of components and the supplier for that, to maybe get the best bargain and or have the most accurate shipping of equipment and so forth. So they might actually be able to help with a bunch of those things. The contractor may need to discuss certain choices with the customer, maybe educate them on, well, if we use this, we need to make sure we do this, or for what you're thinking, this might be a better option or a better route to go. So there might need to be a little bit of education with the contractor as well. The contractor can purchase, receive, inspect, and actually bring any necessary components to the site. Sometimes they're much more knowledgeable in that. That could be a handy thing. The technicians doing the install should be trained and certified as well. That way you're sure that they're doing it correctly and it should hopefully work and things should hopefully work as they're done. There is actually certified fiber optic technicians. There's certified premise cabling technicians as well. Certifications that exist in Fiber Optic Association as well as under BICSI. BICSI is another certifying entity. So your technician should probably have some of these certifications to make sure that they're doing the job correctly. The final requirement for the contractor is testing, troubleshooting, and documenting. And from the get-go, there should be agreement on what is required. What do you need tested, and what kind of results do you need? And then kind of like what's the agreement upon documenting and sharing that information with you. The documentation for a project, as we talked about in the last chapter, really needs to start before anything is actually done, which is why, as we were doing our bid spec this semester, we've been kind of documenting the whole plan all along. Where is things going to go, how we're going to label them, how we're going to install them, that kind of things. That needs to start from the get-go. The contract needs to spell out what's being installed, what's acceptable for test results, what's acceptable for documentation, and that's both important for the contractor to know what's expected of them, and also for the customer to know that they're getting what they need from this fiber optic network or this install. We're going to make sure we get what we were expecting for. So planning for the job, first step, create a schedule. When are things going to happen? Here's a sample Gantt chart that would show maybe what gets done when. Here's our simplified version for our project, but you get the idea of why we did this, why we're spelling out what's going to happen first, second, third, and about how long each task is going to take. That is communication for the customer, so they know. They don't have the expectation it's going to be done next week. No, this is going to take time to do, but also helping for planning, especially if you need to bring subcontractors in to do a certain part of the job. Scheduling, scheduling a job, as we said there, we need to make sure we have a plan. This involves ordering components and making sure they're there at the appropriate time too. Having everything delivered day one is not too helpful because then you got to store it all and maintain it all. You might actually have scheduled deliveries throughout the project. Things that you need are showing up in that week, or maybe just right before you need it. If you're ordering components, if you're ordering common components that are in stock, delivery time should be good. But if I'm doing any kind of made-to-order fiber optic cables, kind of like we did with our plan, you might need to plan ahead. They might need a week or two lead time to be able to make this and ship it to you. So you can't order it today and expect it tomorrow. That might need to be planned. A contractor might try to use the same type of components on every job site, whether it be the same manufacturer, same outlet jack, same box, that sort of thing. That way your technicians are familiar. They know exactly how long it's going to take. Sometimes they might use a more expensive component, but they know for their installers they actually get it done quicker, which overall saves on labor cost. So sometimes as you work places, they might be using a certain component and you're like, why? Those might be the reasons on the back end. Everybody's familiar with it. They can terminate. The success rate is high. It might cost more money, but it's quicker to do, and therefore overall, less labor costs and so forth. Anything that is new, you might need to have your technicians go get training on. And it might just be the manufacturer comes to your site and does a little kind of on-site training, but you might need to send them away for a day or a week-long training on a certain project, product, or procedure. So never show up at the job site with something new. You might need to plan ahead to do some training on that. Ordering components when the job is acquired, if you will. Scheduling delivery, as we said earlier, can be very helpful. You need to plan out where they're going to be delivered. You can't just have them show up at the job site and sit in the rain kind of thing. You might need a warehouse or a spot, or might need to be a locked container at the job site that you're putting it in until it's actually needed. Might actually need to be security there. Might just be a camera, but you might need to hire guards as well, or a security firm to maintain security at the site. We need to schedule labor, again, when our technicians are on site, but also maybe when an outside contractor comes in to do their part of the job too. Labor and materials should be scheduled in. We need to review that schedule with everyone. We need to make sure everybody understands the safety rules on the job site, and be instructed on keeping all extra components and scrap. Some of this might get put together in a package for the customer. And the schedule itself needs to be consulted regularly to make sure we're on task, and maybe adjust because we're a little bit early, or just we're running a little bit late. Maybe the delivery of the next thing comes a little bit late, or I need this contractor to come a day later or a day earlier. So we need to be communicating that. Safety is important, yes. So there needs to be kind of like, what is the norm? What are we doing? And then also you might need special like flagger force for work you're doing along a road. You might need to redirect traffic, and you might need trenching tools, that sort of thing. You might need to call before you dig. So lots of things need to be thought about and planned when you're doing the install. On the job site, for the U.S., OSHA is usually the guide on what should be done on a job site, what should not be done on a job site. And sometimes when you look at OSHA rules, they might not make sense, but if you understand maybe the bigger process that's going on, you might understand, oh, that's why they have that rule that way. And then we need to make sure that the appropriate safety gear, safety glasses, some sites hard hats, sometimes secure, high visibility vests might need to be worn on certain sites or certain jobs. So planning is critical, and then I might need some checklists to make sure that things are done or things are not missed in the process. And they share a couple checklists with us. Like, before we do the install, these things should be done. And again, some of these apply to every job, some apply to maybe special jobs that get done. Before doing the install, make sure all these things are taken care of. During the install, these should be taken care of regularly, maybe daily, to make sure. And then after it's done, making sure we've inspected, documented, did the testing, have the test results, maybe have the extra equipment needed or the extra supplies and equipment that the customer might need to restore something. All right, so moving on to a premise install. The site itself needs to be prepared before we actually start pulling in cable, if you will. So on a premise site, we need to have things like your cable trays, maybe conduit, interduct, J-hooks available and or in place already before we can start pulling cabling in. So we're thinking cable trays in hallways. We might even be thinking anchoring J-hooks in, in our building that we were doing for our bid spec in the classrooms that we're going to be pulling cable into. In the trays, I might need to be allocating space for fiber interduct in there as well, off to the side, not buried under cabling. There might even need to be conduits drilled through floors to go from closet to closet and put in place before we can pull the cabling through. Behind equipment racks, room and or equipment for service loops, that sort of thing. All these things should be thought about and or in place before we start pulling cabling. And that's actually why on our bid spec, our project plan, we had that as some of the first items. Get the cable trays in, get the equipment racks in. Then as I pull cabling, I have places for them to go. Install support structures, yes. So we're following our 569 guidelines on our pathways and spaces. What should be done? What kind of room should we have around equipment racks? What kind of support structures, so forth. Also allowing for future growth. You know, if this is my cable install now, awesome. I have room to expand onto this at a later date. We need to worry about our cable bend radius as we're installing too. If we're looking at fiber optic, we have the, inside plant. We're talking 10 times or 15 times the diameter of the cable for bend radius. And I'm looking at this kind of thing here. Carefully coiling and servicing and making sure I don't have any sharp bends in my cabling. I need to make sure I have patch panels in place or the appropriate splice hardware in place for my terminations. Here we have your fiber optic cables can be terminated in open patch panel, but I might need my 900 micron tight buffered fiber might need to be in a patch panel that has support for it. All right, so I might need to be thinking about the different types of fibers and what is needed for that when it gets to your closet. And again, service loops as we mentioned before. I'm also thinking adequate space around my equipment. This is just our kind of our aerial picture of our closet, making sure there's room around the patch panels and support structure for cabling coming in and out. We said before about fire stopping. We need to make sure, as we have conduits through walls and or floors, that we have plans for how are we going to fire stop that equipment. And there's actually, here's a conduit with a your fire retardant clay, if you will, that puts in there for fire stopping. But they also make fire stopping mechanical hardware that can get used as well. And then here's your 569 standard on what's required for fire stopping. With electrical systems, proper power, we need protection for surges, spikes, and I might even need backup capacity, UPS, generator backup, that sort of thing. I need usually separate grounds for my closet equipment, and I may need specific AC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, usually AC, for the equipment in our closets. And again, our 569 standard has requirements for that, which should be there and which should not be there. Our equipment in our closets, we need to worry about grounding and bonding. Any metallic hardware should be grounded and bonded. Fiber optic doesn't have too much metallic hardware, but I might have shielding that needs to be dealt with. We'll look at that in just a second. So any of my trays, any of my equipment racks need to be properly grounded and bonded. Here's the standard and guide for how I do that. And again, if we do have any fiber optic that has shielding on, armoring on, shielding on, that would also need to be grounded in our closets. So I might need to worry about that with my fiber install. 607 has the grounding and bonding requirements that I would worry about. As I'm installing, I need to make sure things are labeled. Any termination is labeled. There's various ways to do that. As you see, these actually have barcodes on that you could scan to know exactly where the fiber is going, but I need to follow some kind of scheme. 606 is our standard for labeling and identifying and documenting. So I need to have some sort of scheme of how I'm going to label all my cables. And then I also would be adhering to things like my color-coded cable jackets and terminations, my connectors and so forth. I'm following this guideline as well. We're probably installing OM3, so we probably have our aqua-colored cabling, and then we would probably be using, this type of termination here for our OM3. Again, marking, identifying cabling at the patch panel as well as on cables itself. There needs to be a plan, and we should be following that and documenting what we're doing as well. We need to make sure we don't mix our two types of fiber, 62.5 and 5125. That's why we have the color code on the cable and the connectors as well. So we don't intermix those and have signal loss as we go from one core size to a different core size. So they're reminding us then about our cable jackets and our connectors to help with all of that. Alrighty, we will come back in the next podcast and keep on talking on install.